Jupiter and Detriment. This is an audio recording of me reading an article about this topic. This is by the Alice Sparkly Cat. When you have Jupiter in Detriment, you have Jupiter in either Gemini or Virgo. Jupiter is a bit different than the personal planets, which look mostly different for different people, even in the same age group. Jupiter only moves one sign per year, so it tends to define entire age groups. Jupiter is about power. That's something that is understated about Jupiter. Jupiter is Zeus, who claimed power for the human gods and defeated the Titans. Jupiter is about humanism and institutions and knowledge and law and all of that, but mostly Jupiter is about fame and power. One of the first non-mythological people to be compared to Jupiter was Caesar. When you have Jupiter in Detriment, you don't actually want any power. This means that you are not good at doing things which make you powerful or honorable or well known. It means that you have no intellectual loyalty. It means that you catch people off guard because even though you took someone's side one day, you do not stay on that person's side tomorrow. Jupiter in Detriment replaces belief with criticality and knowledge with curiosity. Jupiter in Detriment never makes up its mind because it's only interested in possibility. Jupiter in Detriment isn't interested in answers. It's only interested in making questions do the work of producing more questions. When your Jupiter is in Detriment, you have no morals. You do not borrow other people's ideas around what is right or wrong. Morals do the work of abbreviation, and for Jupiter in Detriment, nothing is ever abbreviated. Everything is always a work in progress. Jupiter in Detriment learns through practice. Jupiter in Gemini doesn't really care about what has been declared to be right and mighty. It only cares about what is relevant and what speaks to others. Jupiter in Virgo only cares about what can be put into action and turned into daily practice. These are the cynical Jupiter placements. The Jupiter placements that engage in things only to talk back after hours detailing every detail about what went wrong. It's the Jupiter that finds collaboration through criticism. A Jupiter that enjoys the art of complaint. Jupiter is adversary, and in adversity moves in opposition to institutions, and Jupiter in adversity never believes when it can question. This is a researcher's Jupiter, a Jupiter that is never done with anything because, you see, Jupiter in Detriment isn't interested in finished things. It's interested in the patterns by which information moves through the world. It's a godless Jupiter. Often, Jupiter in Detriment can be cruel, especially when it witnesses others do what feels like pointless and punishing navel-gazing. Jupiter in Detriment is a Jupiter that feels like it was never allowed to dream as big as other people were allowed to dream. That is why Jupiter in Detriment can be so snarky, because it was taught that envisioning something is a useless exercise that only those with privilege are allowed to do. Jupiter in Detriment can get very angry when it witnesses wonder in others, but it can also become inspired in ways that it is too uncomfortable to move towards independently. Jupiter in Detriment has a complicated relationship with wonder, just like it has a complicated relationship to every big idea that seems frustratingly vague. Jupiter in Detriment doesn't allow itself to think big. But Jupiter in Detriment does wonder. That is why it is so interested in the question over the answer. Because the end of a question, the endless cliff in the sky, seems to contain an infinity that is unavailable in the elsewhere. The way that Jupiter in Detriment questions is never vague, or loose, or mindless. Instead, Jupiter in Detriment is ruthless, specific, and inspired, only when it feels like it has earned inspiration. A lot of that I don't believe, and a lot of it you need it to take with a grain of salt. Thank you for tuning in. Subscribe, like, and hit the bell.